Hello, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Melissa Ridgen. Spring is typically the time of year we can't wait for. We shake off the cobwebs and the cabin fever of winter to a fresh awakening of land and water. But for many First Nations, springtime is a time to panic. When the Canadian government relocated bands to make way for resource development and farming, some were moved to flood-prone areas. Every spring, they watch and they wait. Saskatchewan and Kanesatake are two of the most recent ones in the news on flood watch. It's not a new problem. In 2011, several Manitoba First Nations were flooded intentionally by the government, who had to make a choice to either flood a rural area or to let nature flood Winnipeg. Several hundred people remain evacuees to this day, 8 years later and counting. Today, we're putting flooding in focus, the impact that it has on First Nations across this country. We want you to join in our conversation, including all of you listening on Element Radio in Toronto and Ottawa. Our phone lines are open. You can call us toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. You can also tweet us at APTN InFocus. Before I introduce you to our guests, we're going to go to southern Quebec, where communities are braced for floodwaters. While Kanesatake hasn't hit that point yet, people there are preparing for the worst. Here's Tom Fenario.
This was the scene in May 2017. The low-lying parts of Kanesatake Mohawk territory were among many communities of southwestern Quebec hit hard by flooding. 30 homes were affected. This house eventually had to be torn down. Now, 2 years later, Kanesatake is bracing itself for a repeat.
Water levels are expected to rise a lot higher than 2017. So a lot of the melt up north, all that snow hasn't come down here yet, and it's coming. The high temperatures combined with 5-6 days worth of rain, we're expecting the worst. Environment Canada says 25 to 50 millimeters of rain are expected over the next 2 days, which has Kanesatake keeping their eyes on the water levels of the Lake of Two Mountains.
The water flows like this, out that way. So we're going to have to concentrate some efforts over here to block and divert the flood waters away as much as possible from the shorelines.
Grand Chief Simon says council is also looking into buying pumps for any houses that might be affected. And they will ask some community members to evacuate homes if need be. One thing that is different from 2017, there will be no refusing help from the Army, irregardless if community members still harbor ill feelings towards the armed forces after the Yoka crisis.
This time, we're not playing politics with the security of people, and I think we've grown a little bit more since 1990 that I think we can go over that, okay? The Army is going to be here, not as an invasion force, they're here to help. So I'm not going to refuse it this time.
In 2017, Kanesatake was able to mitigate damage with round-the-clock sandbagging efforts from the community. But with what used to be known as a 100-year flood becoming a regular occurrence, Simon thinks it's unfair for it to fall on community volunteers.
We might dodge the bullet, but I'll tell you something, like I said, in 2017, maybe what we should do is we should send the damn bill over to the oil and gas industry, because it's large part thanks to them that this climate is changing so badly.
People living in southern Quebec flood-prone areas are being asked to keep abreast of the local news this weekend and be prepared to evacuate their home quickly if need be. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Kanesatake, Mohawk Territory.
So from Quebec, we're going to go to Northern Ontario now. The community of Saskatchewan has been evacuated again. It's the 17th time since the late 1950s when the government relocated the First Nation from its traditional spot on the Albany River to the flood-prone north side of the river. It has cost Ottawa hundreds of millions of dollars over the years to evacuate 250 or 2,500 people, feed and lodge them for weeks on end, and then go back and clean up the flood mess when it's done, and then do this over and over again, year after year. And it seems to be taking its toll on a community that knows to prepare to be uprooted every time spring rolls around. Our friends at CTV have that story.
An annual cycle of frustration and despair has gripped Saskatchewan First Nation again. Flooding prompted an emergency evacuation order affecting more than 2,500 people.
We're trying to get people out to Timmins first for those people that their loved one is very sick.
For decades, spring runoff and ice jams on the Albany River have inundated the Cree community near James Bay. Each evacuation costs the federal government up to $22 million.
We shouldn't have a community put at risk like that year in, year out, playing Russian roulette.
As this winter's thick snow cover melts, there are concerns the swollen river will overwhelm a protective dike, prompting Bandon Council to withdraw from the community a week ahead of schedule. Flood victims are being flown to Timmins, Thunder Bay, Cornwall, and Kapuskasing.
It's obviously very trying circumstances for the old and young and sick.
The long-term solution is well known. Move the community to higher ground.
We are assuming our responsibilities.
Nearly 15 years ago, Paul Martin's Liberal government budgeted $500 million to do just that, only to have the Conservatives scrap the plan over concerns the new location was still prone to flooding. 2 years ago, a new promise was made to relocate the reserve, but it's estimated to take up to a decade, despite not having a mention in this year's budget.
Saskatchewan's chief has invited Indigenous Services Minister Seamus O'Regan to visit the troubled First Nation. So far, O'Regan has committed to offering short-term support while working towards a permanent relocation plan. Kevin Gallagher, CTV News, Ottawa.
Earlier today, I talked to Cynthia Kusis. She used to be a community liaison from Saskatchewan. She's now an evacuee in Thunder Bay. She joined me this morning to give us a peek at what's going on there. So, Cynthia, I just read somewhere, this is the 17th time that your community has been evacuated. Does it get easier every time?
No, it doesn't. It's the same stress that families have, like every year. It never gets easier. It gets harder and harder and frustrating, more frustrating.
Well, and when is so you're evacuated now. Were you evacuated last year too, or when's the last time you guys were shipped out of your community?
Yes, we were evacuated last year. I was in Thunder Bay again also last year.
And how long are these evacuations, how long do they usually last?
2 weeks. The shortest 2 weeks, longest 2 months.
2 months, wow. What's the emotional toll that it takes as somebody who's, when I said before we got going here that I'd read that this was the 17th evacuation, you said, oh really? You've lost track of it. This has been such a part of your life. Tell us the emotional or the physical toll that it takes doing this year after year.
A couple of weeks before, people start to get an anxiety, I guess, after what happened in 2006, when the water almost overflowed the dike. I was there that evening. It was terrifying. I never used to mind breakups, but after that, I never wanted to be there again. Yeah.
And so is this something that you guys, that anxiety, you have that wondering, thinking back to 2006, is there, with that anxiety, do people just start kind of putting together their belongings in anticipation that they're going to be evacuated year after year?
Yeah, I think people start putting away their stuff, but many just, I guess, leave their things as they are because we don't know, what's the use of putting stuff away when you don't know what's going to happen, as long as you have your most valuable things is your children and your loved ones. So that's what I always think every year.
And you're a community liaison for evacuees. What does your job entail while you guys are evacuated? What do you do to kind of keep spirits up or provide the needs that people have when they're not in their community and they're in these spread out all over northern Ontario, really?
I was a community liaison, but I'm not anymore. But I know, they have daily morning meetings. They plan what to do, who needs what, who needs medical care, to take the opportunity because we don't have good healthcare back home, and dental and just the important stuff that the medical.
So you guys use this, the evacuation as an opportunity, I guess. It's more like if you're given lemons, make lemonade. So while you're in these communities, people are getting healthcare and dental and that sort of work done. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what liaisons help with, booking appointments, make sure they make it to their appointment.
So my understanding is that the federal government had moved your community from its traditional location on the south side of the Albany River, and they relocated you guys to the flood-prone north side of the Albany River. In 2017, Ottawa had said that, okay, we'll relocate you because we put you in a place that's flooding constantly. Are they putting you back at the original location on the south side, or is there somewhere else that you guys are going to be, where the community will be built?
We're still in the flood zone, but I know in 2017 that the government said they would move us, but they broke that promise. So I know my community is fighting. There was a letter that the chief put out that he was inviting the Prime Minister to visit our community, but I hope.
So you just sit and wait, spring after spring, flood after flood. What would you like to see done? What's the general consensus of the community? What needs to happen?
We need to move. We need to relocate to higher grounds upriver. I know my community doesn't want to move like south, to like. I know they said like Smooth Rock Falls, but they don't want that. They want to stay in their traditional territories where we do our traditional lifestyle seasonally, daily, fishing, hunting, everything like that. Like, that's life back home, and people don't understand that.
Has there been an open dialogue with government? You've got a new Indigenous Services Minister, Seamus O'Regan. Is he lending an ear to this or open to any of these suggestions or moving forward on getting you guys relocated?
Not that I know of, but there's a rally happening. My community is planning a rally in Ottawa, Parliament Hill, April 30th, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. It's just posted today.
Perfect. Okay, well, Cynthia, thank you for taking the time to join us and for telling us about that rally. If anybody else wants to join you on Parliament Hill.
Yes, thank you.
It's time for us to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to visit a Manitoba First Nation that was flooded 8 years ago. People still remain displaced to this day, and there's a whole lot more mess going on with that. Stay with us. Join our conversation now. You can call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Like and watch us live on the APTN News Facebook page. Follow and tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts in an email to infocus@aptn.ca. Welcome back. 6 years ago, with APTN Investigates, I went to the Little Saskatchewan First Nation, where residents had been displaced for then 2 years. They had been scattered throughout the province as evacuees, living in hotels like guests with no place to go. Let's take a look back on the devastation that they endured and where the community is at now in rebuilding.
Unreal what water can do.
Stress level is very high.
It's pretty bad, though. I think all the houses are going to be underwater.
We had to move out of the community just like that, with no notice, no warning, nothing.
It's a total disaster when you think about it.
It was called the Flood of 3 Centuries. Dozens of Manitoba communities and thousands of properties across the province were on the brink of disaster in the spring 2011. As water levels continued to rise, Premier Greg Selinger had to make a decision. Intentionally flood some to spare others, or let Mother Nature decide who bears the brunt.
Based on a unanimous recommendation from our officials, we will create a controlled opening in the dike along the Hoop and Holler Bend. If we stood back and allowed nature to run its course, we would face an almost certain uncontrolled break of the dike. This is a constant threat. An uncontrolled break would be catastrophic and unpredictable.
That controlled break unleashed a torrent from Portage La Prairie into Lake Manitoba, the Fairford River, Lake St. Martin, the Dauphin River, and finally into Lake Winnipeg, an area known as the Interlake.
Among the people fleeing the water's path, 3,000 residents from Penematang, Lake St. Martin, Little Saskatchewan, and Dauphin River First Nations.
Flood Fallout examined how little had been done for flood evacuees 2 years later, particularly for Little Saskatchewan and Lake St. Martin, 2 years after the government chose to flood them to spare Winnipeg. While farmers and rural townspeople quickly rebuilt, 3 levels of government twiddled their thumbs over what to do for 2 years. That's 2 years of evacuees living in hotels, 2 years of communities and families being separated, 2 years of people being lost on the streets of Winnipeg. Here's Little Saskatchewan today. The community has finally relocated. Roads are being built. Houses dot the stark landscape, much different than the cozy community that used to be tucked in the bushes looking out onto the lake. The community isn't the same, and not all of those evacuees have been returned. 8 years later, and counting.
Muriel Woodford is one of the Little Saskatchewan evacuees. She takes us back to the home that she loved, a place where family and friends gathered, tucked into the bush not far from the lake and behind a charming little creek, a place that had room for kids to play. Lilac bushes surrounded her ample deck. She grew a garden for her family. Let's take a look at what's left.
We spent a lot of money fixing it up too, and I really would have loved to come back here. Even now, being around here just makes me lonely. And we lost most of our stuff here after we moved back in 2017. We had 2 storage sets there. If I had a choice, I would have just moved back here. So last year, during this was destroyed by the brush fires and everything we had in here.
It's still sad coming back here, though.
It is sad.
Whose bike was that?
Probably one of my grandkids or my nephews. Some of them used to visit here. Used to have lots of kids here when my boys were growing up. They would bring all their friends here and just told them to make themselves at home and, you know, share whatever with them.
Well, we'll go see your new house.
What new house? I don't like it. And I would rather come and pitch a tent here and stay here than live off reserve. We've lived off reserve for over 6 years due to the flood, and we were all suffering in the city of Winnipeg. Without no administration buildings like Lake St. Martin and Dauphin River, we didn't have nothing. We were left to fend for ourselves for over 6 years.
Joining me now in studio is Muriel Woodford and Bertha Travers. They've been leading the fight for evacuees since that spring flood in 2011. I want you to, I don't think that people understand what it is like. It's one thing to be flooded, like you've got to evacuate, there's a flood in your area. I don't think people can get their head around what that means if it's for 8 years.
Well, it has a lot of emotional impact.
Yeah.
And all the stress you go through, and not feel that feeling of being in your own home is not the same when you have to stay somewhere else.
How long were you gone for?
I was gone for over 6 years. I just recently went back November 2017.
As we saw there, you do have a new house now. Bertha, take me back to the time of the evacuation. I remember you saying, this is years ago when we first chatted, but just the panic and the disbelief.
Yeah.
Share with our viewers and listeners.
My sister kept phoning me and texting me, and she says, come on to the bus, we're being evacuated. And I told her, I said, no, I'm not going anywhere. I said, and I'm not leaving my dog. And I said, are they taking
dial tone in my hair?
Are they taking dogs? And she said, no, they promised that they would feed our dogs. So anyway, I said, I'm not leaving my dog. And I said, I'm going to stay. And at that time, my sister went on the bus, and she left her husband behind to look after the dog, and he was also working.
And where did you go? Did you go to Misty Lake Lodge in nearby Gimli? Was that the first place you were evacuated to?
No, I went to. I believe I went to. I think it was at Place Louis.
So it was into Winnipeg.
Yeah, and then after that, I went to visit some friends out in Gimli, and I asked if I could be relocated to Gimli because that felt a little bit more at home with Gimli.
Yeah, Gimli's a small town just north of Winnipeg, as opposed to where you guys had, a lot of you had been relocated right to the center of downtown Winnipeg, which is a far stretch from the cozy homes that you guys were living on out at Little Saskatchewan, for sure.
Yeah.
Tell me what it's like to be living in a hotel every day. I mean, for work, I've stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks. And I can't tell you, at the end of the 2 weeks, you're happy to get the hell home.
You know, it's
for months and years. Explain how you do it.
It's okay if you have, if you go out to a restaurant to eat once in a while, or in a hotel, go and spend a night or two when you're working. But it's nothing the same when you're evacuated and you're there day in, day out. It's absolutely devastating.
How long did you guys think that you would be, like, when you were in these, were people saying, oh, you'll be home in a month, 2 months, 3 months? Was a timeline ever given, or did you ever have an idea of how long this was going to last?
I was never given any idea.
You knew that the community was a total loss, right? So you knew it would be some time before. Well, you guys didn't even know where to go back to, so then we should back up for our viewers and listeners. So the community is flooded, but it was beyond a state of repair. So the federal government and the province of Manitoba and Little Saskatchewan government had all agreed we need to relocate our community. It can't be rebuilt where it was. It has to be moved. So then you have to start the process of, well, where do we move it to? There has to be land available there. Just the hassle of all of that. You had to have known while you're sitting in these these hotels that you were looking at probably years before you'd go home. But were you hopeful that there would be some sort of stopgap measure in the meantime that would get you out of the hotels and into maybe apartments or rental houses closer to home?
Well, we were hoping that we would go home soon. Given we're there already. Even if we're there already for a couple of months, you think you're gonna go. You think you're gonna be going home soon. That's your dream. Yeah. And but it was absolutely horrifying. When you get a notice, when you got a note stuck on your door telling you, we're all out of here. You're on your own, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing we noticed.
And you guys had basically left with whatever you could carry, like a suitcase with clothes, and that's it. Explain to us, so what was you guys were given, were you fed or were you given money to buy food or clothes? Was there a daily allowance? Explain to us how that worked while you were evacuated.
Yes, we were fed in a hotel like in Misty Lake Lodge. But I was in council in 2011 and 12 when this flood happened. Mm-hmm. My concern was, after we stayed there for a while, like almost the middle of summer already, I started noticing, like I have a daughter too that's constantly sick, she's diabetic. So she was in and out of the hospital almost every week or every third day or something. And my nephew too, which we lost before we moved back home. He was on dialysis here in the city.
And this is just from the diet that you're...
Yes, because I noticed while we were in Gimli, and I also have a disabled son, and the foods they were serving there, we're not used to that kind of food. Like at home we can make our own meals the way we want to make them. Mm-hmm. But staying in a hotel, everybody has to eat the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that people were getting sicker. And I'm a certified healthcare aide myself, and I can see the signs. So I made arrangements with MANIF, the ones that have chronic medical condition, to give them their own money so they can buy the stuff that they needed to eat, instead of all that greasy stuff like fries, fast foods and stuff in the hotel.
People in Manitoba, our watchers in Manitoba, would remember there was some scandal attached to MANIF as well with regards to the food. MANIF is the Manitoba Association of Native Firefighters. That's the group that was tasked with coordinating the evacuations and taking care of evacuees at the hotels. One of the things that they had done was ring up a $1 million food bill at a local popular high-end Italian eatery here in Winnipeg to provide snacks with to evacuees. So you're getting these spicy Italian dishes like sandwiches and whatnot, and so there was complaints from elders and whatnot. But that's not all MANIF was involved in. Here's a clip from a story I did in 2013 talking to the manager at Misty Lake Lodge in Gimli, which is where some of the evacuees were being had stayed. They were scattered all across the province, but there was a large chunk that were in Gimli. Let's take a look at that clip.
We've probably had at least 50 or 60 different coordinators come through here, and I think we've had 3 that were very good.
And the ones that were bad were allegedly very bad.
They did a lot of cocaine, they drank a lot of alcohol, they smoked a lot of pot. It would be 4 or 5 or 6 days and they would lock themselves in their room. They wouldn't come out of their room. They would call and have food delivered to them occasionally. And they would just sit in there and do drugs and have people deliver drugs to them. So this is where the coordinators spent most of their time, would be sitting outside here, drinking, smoking, sitting in a lawn chair. And they had a drug dealer who would pull up from over in between the trees, drive over in front of them, throw a baggie out the window, usually of either cocaine or pot, and then would do a UE, drive by the play structure where there's usually were kids playing, and drive back through the grass. And it happened repeatedly.
This photo was taken inside a coordinator's room. It suggests someone used plastic spoons and a hotel spoon to smoke drugs. But that's not all. The list of accusations seem endless.
There's been so many instances of coordinators sleeping with evacuees, banging on their doors at all hours of the night, claiming to be doing room checks, which they have absolutely no authority to do. They had their kids picking on other, like evacuees' kids. Reports of inappropriate behavior going on between the adult male coordinators and some of the high school students. The police have been here 28 times. Out of those 28 times, only 2 or 3 of the incidences did not involve the coordinators. Domestic violence, we've had them arrested for drunken disorderly behavior.
Rooms were trashed, carpets ruined, a mess left behind, walls were punched in.
All that information is passed on to MANIF, and none of the coordinators have ever been fired. If anything, they just get switched to a different hotel, and after a few months, they get sent back here again.
So on top of being homeless, not knowing the condition of your home, when you're going to go home, you are being cared for by people who govern themselves like this. I always thought it was quite interesting that these people who are in charge of all of these hundreds of evacuees didn't even know that you can't light a plastic spoon on fire to smoke your crack or whatever it was. I think we have a caller on the line. Maurice from Quebec, are you there? Hello? Oh, we lost him. So let's talk a little bit about, so you guys had front row seats to some of the behavior that was going on with these evacuees. Give us a little clip of those fond memories.
Well, that seems like a lot of money for snacks and stuff.
$1 million.
Yes.
$1 million for snacks, and then they will come and ply
Because
your
I know the
women
snacks,
with alcohol and.
The snacks that were provided for evacuees in Gimli mostly were cookies, milk, or juice, or fruit.
You guys were treated well there, though, hey? Like the people at Misty Lake, the hotel staff themselves, were they not?
I don't know, like being a First Nations person, everywhere you go, you're being treated differently. And you can feel that there too.
Yeah. Even at the lodge. What was your, I mean, you lived there for, how many years were you at Misty Lake?
I was there, I think I was there a couple of years, and then they finally, then they were going to close in November.
Right.
So I stayed right up until November 1st there.
You're still an evacuee.
Yeah.
8 years. So we'll talk later about later in the show about how the community has been rebuilt or is in the process of being rebuilt. Some people have gone home. There's still 300 people who are on that original evacuee list who haven't gone back. You're one of them. Where are you living?
I'm living in a suite, and a two-bedroom suite, and
in Winnipeg.
Yeah, here in Winnipeg. I enjoy myself. I keep myself busy. I work. I work all the time.
Are you going to go back?
Yes, I'm going to go back, but that's my way of filling my time as I wait, and I find that enjoyable. That activity enjoyable. And I go for walks, because that's one of the things I used to do when I was at home.
You're in a very beautiful spot too.
Yeah.
And your place was just gutted in a flood, but then in addition to that, it was a brush fire went through. Same brush fire probably that took out yours. Yeah. So there was literally nothing to go back to.
Yeah.
Did you ever think before the flood in 2011 that you would be a Winnipegger?
No, I was really devastated when I found that I had to leave.
Yeah.
Because to me, it really traumatized me emotionally, because this is the second time in my life that, being taken off reserve, like when I was a little girl, when I went to residential school.
So this was just like residential school?
Yeah,
again, hey?
right back again, the memories, the flashing, and it was horrible. So it took me until about, June 14th when I actually moved, and the high waters really came, and the water was hitting the Jeep wheel wells.
Yeah.
I finally got out then, and I told my dog, I said, "Chill, it's time to go."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have returned just recently. Like, was it last year that you moved back?
A little over a year.
A year ago. How is it being back in the community? Well, you were gone for 8 years, 7 years.
I was gone for almost 7 years.
Yeah. What's it like being back?
Doesn't feel like home. I don't feel like home. That's the sad part.
It's like
other people had a chance. They were given a choice to go and select where they wanted their houses. And one of the council members asked me if I wanted my house where my old house was. And I said yes. But then he told us when we went there, if I didn't take that house, I'd be cut off Red Cross. And I didn't have any money to pay the rent where I used to live on Selkirk Avenue here in Winnipeg.
So it was like you either
meant
could
like
remain
a threat to me.
Yeah. So you either remain an evacuee but start paying for yourself, or you take the house that's given to you.
I was given that choice, either to take the house that was assigned to me, or I'd be cut off Red Cross.
Yeah.
And where am I going to go with a disabled son?
Yeah.
It's hard,
And talking about the cost of all of this, I checked in with Indigenous Services Canada yesterday, and the cost that we're at so far, did they print it off? Yeah, fun fact. As of April 23rd, 2019, the total cost related to the 2011 flood in Manitoba's Interlake is $190 million. That's how much Ottawa has spent as of this month.
Rather than being discriminatory against us, they would have done better if they started building our community without money, for the people.
Yes.
Okay, well, we got to take another break. You can spend all day talking about the stupidity that happens in Ottawa, that's for sure. But when we come back, we're going to talk to two councillors from the Little Saskatchewan First Nation. They're going to tell us how they're rebuilding the community that has been torn apart for 8 years, scattered across the province. and why it's taken so long. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about spring flooding and how it affects so many First Nations communities entirely differently than it would affect other communities that are flooded, non-Indigenous communities when they get flooded. These aren't privately owned and insured homes, and the properties Ottawa has to arrange to fix all of it. And as we all know, things that come out of Ottawa aren't necessarily done quickly or properly. Joining me now is Daryl Shorting and Leroy Thompson, band councillors at the Little Saskatchewan First Nation, which was flooded here in Manitoba in 2011. For 8 years, their community has been spread across Manitoba while the feds relocated the reserve and had to start the building process. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I got to visit your community quickly on Monday, just popped up to see what's changed. I hadn't been there since, there had been no ground broken last time I was there in 2013. Tell us what, I mean, we'll start back at okay, so we don't have a community. Now what do we do? Where do you even begin?
Well, if I could add, our community's been sandbagging for the last 20 years. So there's always been floodwaters surrounding, we live off the shore of Lake St. Martin.
Yeah.
So for the past 20 years, we've been sandbagging. Now in 2011, I was a newly elected council member, so everything was new to myself. Muriel was also with council with myself at the time.
Muriel, our guest, if you're just joining us, she was on just before the break. She joined us.
At that time, she was a council member. So from being a community member, I've heard Chief and Council talking about higher ground strategy, which took years. We bought land adjacent, we bought the farmers out adjacent to our community. So the farmers were bought out and hoping to rebuild on higher ground.
I just want to stop you for a second. What was suddenly causing the flooding like 20 years previous? Had a dam gone up or? That's where
Portage diversion came into effect, I guess, into play, where all water is diverted going north. And when it goes north, it comes through, as you shown earlier in the map, it goes through Fairford Dam, which is east of us. So those waters come through that dam, and this is where we started getting flooded.
This is when
we've never seen it water go that high.
Yeah.
So,
well, and when people start messing with how the water is supposed to flow, you can't control necessarily the outcomes of that. And so you guys living on the shores of Lake St. Martin were living with that reality. Somebody decided to mess with the water somewhere else, and it now becomes your problem.
So we had some band members stay back and try and save as much the water as possible from the inland. We had pumps going 24/7. We had tractors going 24/7 pretty much, trying to put the water back into the lake side of Lake St. Martin.
And you guys did save some things. Like I was just there on Monday, and there was the school still there and fine, the daycare.
Yes.
That stuff. What else was still there? You guys had to get a new band office, though, right?
We got a temporary band office right now. We lost the band office completely. We lost our church completely.
Right, and I did see a new church being built at the new town site. Just for the people who don't know Little Saskatchewan, the lay of the land, how far is the new site from the old site?
It's about a mile. It's just adjacent. It's far enough for kids can enjoy. Kids have to walk to go to the school. We have a play structure. We build a new play structure in the new site. So
I want to talk to you about so the first wave of people come back in 2017?
Yes.
So they've been gone for 6 years, evacuees for 6 years by this point in time. What's it like for community leaders? I mean, you've lost your community, really, because it wasn't like evacuees were all together somewhere living as community members. They were scattered all over the place.
Yes.
So what's it like to be, okay, we've got the first wave of houses and we've got to bring this scattered community back, not just to the land, but to give them that, how do you get that sense of community back that's been lost for 6 years?
What we've been trying to do in the past few years to bring our community together and to bring people together is to hold events such as the Treaty Day events that we hold, and we also hold the fishing derbies. We're creative in how to bring people together. We supply meals in the community, have a barbecue. We also held meals here in Winnipeg, which Muriel spearheaded before, a meal that Red Cross paid for. And things like that that bring people together is a way to go, and hopefully not resolve all the issues, but also to bring people together.
Yeah.
And with the 2011 flood, I have a document here from Stephen Trainer, dated April 25th, 2017. These are the lands that you're questioning about. You can take a look at.
Oh, yeah. So well,
these are lands that are adjacent to our community that the Economic Development Corporation paid for back from 1996 up to 1999. They became property of Little Saskatchewan First Nation.
And this goes back to what you were talking about starting to plan for the higher ground strategy. Yes. So the community where it is now, this is land that was purchased 96?
96 was that we started the process back in 96. I was newly elected onto council at that time.
So, and we might as well get to the part, I had it further down my question list, but the where you guys are now, the new community, there's a lot of rumors and chit-chat back and forth in your community that this is not reserve land, that this was...
Okay, well, this
is what you're talking about.
This will resolve that worry.
What do you, and I know for a fact that it is reserve land because I found out from Indigenous Services Canada, in fact, that it was designated new reserve land on April 13th, 2017, and it is above the record flood levels that were experienced in 2011. You are high, you are dry, and you are on reserve land. We can end that rumor.
Unfortunately, I have a map here from the province of Manitoba, where it shows our lands here are going to be destroyed at 806 above sea level. The only thing that saves our community from further flooding is the main market road in our community, which sits at 805.5. Count wave action of 3 feet onto that 806.
Right.
It's going to destroy Little Saskatchewan. The old First Nation, as we know it today, will be destroyed and will be completely underwater. And you know, the government, fails to sit at the table. The provincial government fails to sit at our table. It's always the federal government that tries to resolve our issues. We have a brand new fire truck that was brought forth to the community, a $300,000 fire truck that we can't even use. We don't have proper training for our people to be trained how to use that $300,000 fire truck. And it's illegal to put people in a community setting where you leave people vulnerable to house fires. We already lost one house due to fire. We have vandalism. We have homeowners that we did give homes to, they destroyed them. You know, these are the sad facts. People that have come home telling us leadership that, well, I have 4 children with me that want to come home. We've called band members after band member, come home now, it's time to come home. They say, put me on the last phase. The last phase, there is no more last phase. Come home.
People are becoming, what did you say? People have become urbanized. Like this,
urbanized,
this has ripped the community apart, and now some people are like, meh, I'm not going home.
If you left at 15 years old, you're now 23 with a family living in the city of Winnipeg. You can go to any corner store, or 7-Eleven or Walmart to do your shopping. Right now, leadership is working on a store, a gas bar, and we're building a church. And there's still items on the table that we need to negotiate, and the federal government closed the negotiating door on us. We kind of went backwards with our project, with our housing. We build the houses first.
Yeah, tell me how many, you guys have 77 houses that have been built?
First phase.
First phase, and people are living in those 77 houses. You've got 93 that are still to be, are under construction or soon. When does that phase be complete?
It should be done in June or July. We're coming to the end of it.
So that's 93 more houses. You can bring more families back into. Are the houses? How do you pick who gets the house?
Well, this is the difficult part. Because we all know each other, and half of us are related. We all know each other.
Of course.
So
that's any reserve in any part of this country.
So when we talked to the federal government on how we allocate these houses, we told them the issue of some of these people are not evacuees, but they don't have a home, or their home was destroyed, where a lot of us lived in our homes where we were overcrowded.
Right.
So we brought that to the table, where national occupancy standards should be recognized by both governments. Now, the problem that I'm seeing is we're dealing with two governments. We're dealing with the provincial and the federal.
Yeah.
The federal is on our side, but the provincial, as Daryl stated, has never come to the table to listen. They had a representative, but that representative has no authority on moving on anything.
Okay, we got a caller here who has a question.
Okay.
Daniel? Daniel, are you
Hello?
there? Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fabulous, thanks. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. My question is towards the two gentlemen being interviewed right now. Is that are they happy with the new project that has been given to them by the government? Like, is the land, more specifically, are they happy with it? Is it really going to prevent flooding in the future? Has there really been enough compensation in their eyes? Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Daniel, I'll quickly answer that one for you. Daniel, thank you for your call and your concerns in our community. How much is enough? You know, when they decided to flood, meaning the provincial government of Manitoba, flooding our communities, picking on the most vulnerable people in society today, that we can't afford proper legal representation.
Yeah.
Here, if you were to, here, Daniel, we saved the city of Winnipeg and its surrounding areas. Here, we would have been talking billions of dollars, where Canada and the province of Manitoba would have had to settle with people. Here, we're talking $190 million so far. Now, $190 million to a couple of $1 billion that would have cost this great city of Winnipeg and its surrounding areas. 2 years after the 2011 flood, cottage owners in St. Laurent Beach were already home.
This wasn't just First Nations that were flooded, for people who are unfamiliar with it. There was towns and cottagers and farmers who were flooded. 2 years later,
they were home.
They're home. Everything is fine. They're properly compensated.
There's a travesty here. I mean, we had a hydrologist that told us that he couldn't work with the First Nation because somebody at the federal bureaucrats told him they won't no longer have any more contracts in this province of Manitoba if he was to help the First Nation. Now, this is a hydrologist.
Yeah.
Michelle Burrows, Deputy Minister of Indian Affairs, called our body of water, Lake St. Martin, a reservoir. That is not a reservoir. That's a lake of Lake St. Martin that we live on the shores of.
Yeah.
And if they're calling it a reservoir, well, it has to do something with Manitoba Hydro.
Yeah.
If it's a reservoir. So money-wise, I don't think it's enough. We have the forgotten people, meaning the 23, 25 years of age with families of their own that have come home, want to come home with children of their own. We don't have housing for them.
Just to quickly answer, Daniel, the problem of Little Saskatchewan moving forward, the province of Manitoba issued an easement on Lake St. Martin, which is 806. Now, in order to move forward, as a council member and a leader of my community, I'm more concerned of what's 20 years down the road. There's a channel being built from Watchorn that is going to go into Lake St. Martin. As Daryl mentioned, it's going to be used as a reservoir. Long-term wise, it's not enough. Right now, in order for things to keep on moving, we need to sign off on a CSA, it's called Comprehensive Settle Agreement.
Right.
This is where they tally up what they're going to compensate us. And right now, we don't know where they got those numbers from. So trying to move forward and rebuild our community, it's been difficult.
We're running out of time. A judge has granted a $90 million settlement to those who lost property in the floods. Do you guys know quickly, where's that at? Like, this is for people's property at Lake St. Martin.
One of the things...
How much money would they get?
One of the things, the class action was brought to the table, and it took a lot of things, responsibility away from chief and council, so we don't know too many. Bertha Delorme was sitting here, was one of the heads, representative for Little Saskatchewan. Chief Hector Shorting gave her a letter to advocate for us, so it had nothing to do with chief and council.
Okay, well, that's something I'm going to put on my to-do list to follow up and see what the hell's happening with the $90 million settlement, but we're out of time. Thank you guys for joining me too, by the way, coming all the way out here to chat.
Thank you for inviting us.
And thank you to the viewers and our listeners. We're always happy to have you carve out some time to join us. If you missed something today or want to hear this again, you can always download this show as a podcast on aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Ridgen, and I'll see you back here next week.